Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is the merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.
Welcome. Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast. This is Merger Wednesdays. Merger Wednesdays, ladies and gentlemen. Merger Wednesdays. And there's a special thing that's happening tonight. Tonight, we close out the first season of Merger Wednesdays. Woo-hoo! Yes, we close out the first season of Merger Wednesdays, man, which also means we close out the last chapter of the Merger Year One book that I'm currently working on, right? Man, what a great time to be alive, man. All these things are happening. Yeah, I'm super excited, right? Super excited, man. Super excited, right? But you know what? What else I'm excited about, man? I'm excited that last night the Sensei and I celebrated 2-year anniversary of Tech Tuesdays. 2-year anniversary of Tech Tuesdays. 2-year marking him 2 years on that show, right? Tech Tuesdays, right? And tonight, book two is selling. Look like we're on our way to becoming a two-time bestseller. Right? Yeah, so if you haven't, check the link at the bottom. Go get Go Time 2. The train has left the station. And while you're out there, get Go Time 1. The train, all aboard the fired up train, right? So Go Time 1, let's not get confused. Go Time 1, all aboard the fired up train, and Go Time 2, the train has left the station, right? Go pick both of those up. And if you haven't seen all of our episodes, man, go to our website at www.thefinalbosspodcast.com to see all of our episodes. This is episode number 295. We are five episodes away from season 300, from episode 300, season 5. Episode number 300, season 5, The Harvest. We have 5 episodes away. Look, before we get into tonight's show, man, I'm getting these admin notes out, right? If you want to be a part of the show, you want to, tomorrow we're having a town hall. So if you want to be a part of our town hall, make sure that you get your email to us. You have questions, concerns, you want to bring up a topic on town hall, shoot us an email and we'll add you into the mix, man. I'm still reviewing, so you still have some time to be a part of the town hall. And we're going to have a great town hall tomorrow, man. We're going to have a great town hall tomorrow on Special Guest Thursdays, right? And, or that subject may change. It may change, man. We might have a last-minute guest. It happens, right? So before we get started, as you know, the greeting of the day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day. This is for entertainment purposes only. And look, man, listen. You know what? My chair is really low. Here we go. Look, I know this is the least watched show in our lineup because it's a doctoral show, right? But I get it. I get it, man. Not everybody understands it. Not everybody finds it to be exciting information, because a lot of stuff that I'm talking about, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean this is not happening. I keep saying that. Just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening. And the information I am conveying to you during this episode is about information that you do not know is happening behind closed doors, right? Not only does it happen behind closed doors, it's happening on academic levels, doctorate levels, man, by scientists, by researchers, by these big wig research companies, intel companies, tech companies, right? These companies that are working on technology that you aren't privy to, right? Because you don't know where to go look. So that's the whole premise, man. A lot of the articles and the research that I'm doing comes from well, not a lot, all of it is peer-reviewed information. All of it is peer-reviewed research, right? So that's why I continue, right? That's why I continue. That's why Merger Year One is going to be a phenomenal book. It's going to be a phenomenal book. All right. So before we get into tonight's show, let's go ahead and get rid of these headlines, right? Get the headlines out of here. Headline bars are out of here. And let's get ready to get into the show, right? So if you don't know, this is season 4 of the Rebirth Arc 5, the Declaration. And this is Merger Wednesdays number 33. Merger Wednesdays number 33. And episode, hey, Chicani, I see you. Episode number 295, man. 5 more episodes in this season of the Final Boss podcast. So we're talking 2 different seasons, right? So Merger, who runs parallel within the Final Boss animal, the Final Boss has its own season, and Merger has its own season, right? It does not run along with, but it is parallel or embedded into. So Merger ends tonight, season 1. Final Boss podcast season 4 ends in 5 more episodes, right? 5 more episodes, right? That's when season 5, the harvest begins. Season 5, the harvest begins, man. I'm super excited about that, right? And this is let's close out layer 4 of the 4 layers of consciousness sovereignty framework, right? We've talked about the private, we talked about shared, we talked about collective. Tonight we're going to be talking about immortal. And I know you guys are like, what? Listen, the tech is here. It's here. This is not science fiction. This is science now. It's here, right? Now let's get ready to get into it. Did I give you brass tacks? No, I didn't give you the brass tacks, man. Before we get into tonight's show, I have to give you the brass tacks. And the brass tacks comes from, you know what? Let's wait on the brass tacks. Yeah, let's wait on it, right? Let's wait on it. Let me give you some information first. It's 9 minutes in. Let me give you some information first, right? In 2026, or any given month, right? Zelda Williams is still asking strangers publicly to stop sending her AI-generated videos of her dead dad, right? Robin Williams has been gone for over a decade. He never consented to appearing in a single one of those, right? He couldn't. Nobody asked him because nobody could. And that's not hypothetical for tonight's episode. That's the world you're already living in right now, right? Because in 2026, where a multi-billion-dollar digital afterlife industry is racing ahead of a patchwork of 8 state laws and 1 federal bill still stuck in committee. And where the actual technology to upload a human consciousness doesn't exist and won't for decades, no matter what the marketing says, that is our open, right? Good evening, Final Boss community. Good evening, Final Boss community. To all of our community, smarts, motivators, warriors, final bosses. This is Merger Wednesdays, episode number 33. Final Boss podcast, episode number 295, right? We built the private consciousness. We built the shared consciousness. We built the collective consciousness. And tonight, we're going to close the loop on all three, and we're going to close merger year one by asking the question nobody wants to answer while they're still alive to answer it. What happens to your mind, your voice, your face after you're not here to say yes or no? I am the Final Boss. This is the Final Boss podcast, and we are getting ready to get right into it, right? Rebirth is here. Declaration is here. Episode 33 is here, right? And this is the show where doctoral level research meets community level clarity, right? It's not about panic. It's not about hype. This is verified sources only, peer-reviewed, where the doctrine requires it, primary legal text, where the doctrine requires it, right? And tonight completes the fourth and final layer of the consciousness sovereignty framework. It closes merger year one in the same episode, right? Merger 30 protected what's inside your skull. Merger 31 governed who gets to look in. Merger 32 governed what happens when you, yes, you, hand a piece of your mind to a group. Tonight governs what happens to all of it, all three layers after you're gone, right? Because that's the layer nobody built a functioning legal framework for yet. And it's also the final chapter this year, one book needed to close, right? So, speaking to all four pillars of the community, smarts, the legal architecture across most of the episode is the closest thing to a full picture that exists right now. Final bosses, the cause confession, and later on is your money in the bank moment, right? And motivators, the personal sovereignty protocol that we'll be talking about. There we go. Doubles your closing move for the entire year one arc, right? And warriors, the uncomfortable verdict is coming. It's about the fight you need to see coming, right? And that's our conversation in a nutshell. Now let's dig deep. But before we dig deep, here's the brass tacks of the evening, right? Here's the brass tacks. Here we go. You don't get a vote on what happens to your mind after you're gone unless you write the vote down first. I know you're like, what is he talking about? I'm going to give you the brass tacks again. Right? You don't get a vote on what happens to your mind after you're gone unless you write the vote down first. That's the brass tacks. Now, let's get into some information, right? Immortal consciousness is not one technology. Tonight, it's three. And the entire legal and ethical crisis of the merger comes from people who are confusing them. The first is mind uploading, a genuine scientific attempt to copy a brain's causal structure into a computer of completely, I should say, that the resulting process is, in some sense, real sense, still you. The second is the digital replica, an AI trained on your voice, your writing, your face, and your patterns, built to imitate you convincingly enough that people who loved you can keep talking to something that sounds like you. The third, neural data archiving, simply keeping the raw brain derived data itself in storage, whether or not anyone builds anything from it yet, right? Only the first one is actually about consciousness continuing. The other two are about a very good performance of you running after you're gone. The industry selling this to grieving families right now is overwhelmingly the second category, and it's not small. Multiple market analysis this year put the digital afterlife and digital legacy sector in the multi-billion-dollar range today. And with independent projections putting it between 60 and 80 billion dollars by the early of 2030. That's not hypothetical future market. That's venture capital moving into grief right now in this year of our Lord of 2026, right? Now, for those who don't know, I have my language block, and here it is. When somebody says, upload your consciousness, almost nobody selling that product tonight is actually doing that. They're building a very convincing puppet of your texts, your voicemails, and your old videos. The puppet can comfort a grieving family. It can also be sold, subscribed to, hacked, or shut down when the company runs out of funding. Know which one you're being sold before you sign anything. And smarts, this is your framework tonight. 3 different technologies wearing one marketing word. And the difference between them is the difference between science and a seance, right? That's the latest plot. Look, I told you earlier, right, that one of the 3 pathways is actually about consciousness continuing. Tonight's doctrine says the pathway isn't close. The State of Brain Emulation Report 2025 is the most comprehensive technical assessment published on this particular subject. Places which places whole brain emulation at technology readiness levels 1 to 2, which are basic principles that are observed, concept formulated, and nothing close to deployment. And it puts a timeline at a 30 to 40 years minimum, assuming it's possible, even possible at all, right? But the most advanced integrative whole organism simulation published to date is called BAAI worm, right? BAAI worm, right? Which is peer-reviewed, published in the Nature Computational Science in 2024. It closes the loop between a biophysically detailed neural model and a physical body and the environment model for C, right? We talked about C. C. elegans, a worm whose complete nervous system is roughly 300 neurons, and it successfully reproduces the worm's real zigzag locomotion toward attractions, right? Even at scale, the paper's own authors list expanding it to the complete 300 neuron network as unfinished future work. It does not emulate any specific individual worm, let alone a specific human being with 60, 70, 80 years of lived memory encoded across roughly 86 billion neurons. Independent estimates modeling what a single real-time human scale emulation would require put to the compute cost at somewhere between 10 and 40,000, which is top tier AI processors running continuously just to hold the weight before anyone's even solved how to validate that resulting process is faithful to the original person rather than a statistically plausible stranger wearing its name, right? Now, here's my language block, right? Here's my language block. Nobody is uploading a human consciousness this decade. It's not happening, right? Not this generation. And arguably this century or current trajectory. If a company tells you different tonight in 2026, they are selling you a category 2 from earlier, which we spoke of. They're selling you the puppet and calling it category 1, the real thing. That's not innovation. That's a pricing strategy for grief, right? And warriors, mark this number. 300 neurons is the current ceiling for a full stimulation. A human brain has roughly 86 billion, right? 86 with a B. Do the math before you believe a sales pitch. That's the lamest book, ladies and gentlemen, right? Now, set the technology aside for a couple minutes and sit with the older question underneath it, because every grief bot and every mind upload pitch is quietly answering a question philosophers have fought over for 300 years without settling it, right? What makes you tomorrow the same person as you are today? Now, that's a great question, right? So John Locke's answer was from 1690 was memory, which is your continuous, right? You're continuous with your past self because you remember being them. Derek Parfit, 3 centuries later, broke the answer with a thought experiment that's now closer to an engineering question than a classroom exercise. Because if a machine scanned you, destroyed the original, and built a perfect copy elsewhere with all the memories intact, is that a copy of you or a stranger who sincerely believes they're you? Parfit's own conclusion was unsettling. He argued personal identity isn't what matters. Survival of certain psychological connections is what matters. And that reframing quietly does what most of the philosophical work the digital afterlife industry needs done, without ever having to prove a computer program is conscious, right? The ship of thesis. The ship of thesis problem sits underneath both, right? So listen, replace every plank of a ship one at a time. And at what point, if any, does it stop being the same ship? A grief bot trained on your text isn't replacing planks. It's built from scraps and running a resemblance. But the question, family, are asking right now is when they use one of Locke's questions in its oldest form, is this still my father? Or a very good impression of my father performing memories he never had the experience of performing, right? Now, here's my lamest block, right? You don't need a philosophy degree to feel this, what I'm about to say, right? So think about it. Think about a voicemail you saved from someone who has passed, right? Sometimes it can be comforting, right? Now, imagine our voicemail could talk back. Well, guess what you will want to say next and never run out of new things to say, right? At some point, comforting recording becomes something else, and nobody's told you exactly where that line is because nobody agrees where it is, right? Motivators, this is your building block. Decide now, right? While you're alive, what continuity means to you, because the industry will happily decide it for your family if you don't, right? That was the lamest block. Now, the industry likes to talk about digital immortality, right? One of those buzzwords that you keep hearing, digital immortality, right? As the 2026 invention, but it's not. Listen, the first mainstream flashpoint arrived in 2021 when director Morgan Neville's documentary Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain, used an AI-generated model for the late chef's own voice to narrate 3 lines, and Bourdain had written but never spoken out loud. For under 60 seconds of total runtime, without disclosing it to audiences up front, it only surfaced because the New Yorker writer Helen Rosner asked Neville in an interview how he'd found audio of Bourdain reading one specific email. He hadn't. He built it. The backlash wasn't really about the technology working, because it worked, and it worked convincingly. It worked convincingly enough that critics couldn't tell which lines were synthetic. The backlash was about consent, disclosure, and about a dead man having the zero opportunity to say no. That case established a pattern every case since has followed. The technology arrives first. It works well enough to be genuinely useful or genuinely moving, and the consent question gets asked only after the result is already public. Bourdain couldn't object. He also couldn't have anticipated, when he recorded his own writing years earlier, that his voice would someday be synthetically extended into sentences he never chose to say. Now, here's my layman's block. Right? Somebody used a dead public figure's voice to say something he never said. Sourced from something he did right. That's not a hypothetical. That's the exact shape of the first major mainstream controversy in this space. And it happened in 2021, before most consumer grief bot companies even existed. The technology didn't wait for the ethics to catch up. It never does. And final bosses, I need you to hold that pattern in your head for the rest of the conversation for tonight, because every legal fix we're about to walk through exists because that happened first, right? And the law is always the response, never the warning, right? That was the layman's block, right? Now, let's move on from the flashpoint moment, right, to the current one. Let's talk about this year, right? Because the daughter of a beloved late actor and comedian has spent months publicly asking strangers to stop sending her AI-generated videos of her father, because using generative video tools showing his voice, and his face in scenes he never filmed and lines he never said. She has no clean legal mechanism to stop it from happening, or at least to stop most of it. Because in most states right now, there is no clear right of publicity that automatically extends to a deceased parent likeness against anonymous strangers making content for free outside a commercial product. And at the same time, right, on the corporate side, Meta was granted a patent. That patent is U.S. Patent 12513-102, which was filed in 2023 and granted in late December of 2025, listing the company's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, as primary author, describing a large language model system that could simulate a deceased or long absence user social media activity, including posts, comments, likes, and direct messages in that person's own voice and style. Meta has stated it has no current plans to build the product. The patent exists anyway. Patents don't require intent to ship. They require only that a company wanted the option reserved legally before anyone else can claim it, right? Now, here's my lamest block. Yes, Chikandi. Wow, exactly. Hey, Rachel, I see you. Thank you for joining us. And Ann Haluska, thank you for being. And here's my lamest block. One family is asking strangers with no legal leverage to stop building fake videos of their dead father for free. $1 trillion company already owns the patent to do something similar to your dead relative's social media automatically at scale if it ever decides to do so. Those two facts sitting in the same year should tell you everything about who currently holds power in this space, and it isn't the families, unless you got $1 trillion laying around, right? Warriors, this is the fight underneath tonight's fight. Not whether that technology exists, it already does, but who gets to decide when it is used or on someone who can't consent anymore because they're no longer here, right? That's the lamest block. Now, we said something earlier, right? And we talked about briefly about where the law is actually trying to close this loop, right? And I'm not talking about the anything other than the No Fakes Act. If you haven't heard about the No Fakes Act, go look it up, right? Go look up the No Fakes Act. Formerly known as the Nurture Originals, right? The Nurture Originals Foster Act, all right? And Keep Entertainment Safe Act of 2026, which creates the first federal intellectual property rights in your own voice and visual likeness for every American, not just celebrities. The right is licensable. It survives your death, and critically, the postmortem version of that right doesn't run forever. It terminates no more than 70 years after you pass, and it can be renewed by your estate in defined windows if your heirs want to keep enforcing it, right? The bill cleared the Senate Judiciary Committee anonymously on June 22nd of this year, with backing from SAG-AFTRA, the Motion Picture Association, and the Human Artistry Campaign. It has not passed the full Senate. It has not passed the House. It is not law as of tonight's broadcast, but it's close. And it's further along than any comparable federal privacy bill we've covered on this show. But advanced out of committee and protects your family are not the same sentence yet, right? And here's my language block. So, for the first time, there's a real federal bill that would give your voice and face legal protection after you pass away, with your family able to enforce it up to 70 years. That's genuinely significant. It's also not passed yet. Don't plan your family's protection around a bill sitting in Congress. Plan around what's actually enforceable today, right? What we talked about coming up, you want to stay. You want to stay for that, right? Because that is going to show you just how thin the legislation really is, right? Smarts, track the bill's number if you want the receipts, right? S4591 in the 119th Congress. Track it, right? Now, before there was a federal bill, there was a usual thing that we talked about on this show, right? An uneven patchwork of 8 states that moved first. And we talked about this a lot. We talked about Tennessee, California, Illinois, New York, Utah, Arkansas, Montana, and Washington State have each passed their own laws specifically addressing AI-generated digital replicas of a person's voice and likeness. Some of those laws protect performers and celebrities narrowly. Some protect any identifiable private citizen broadly. none of them fully agree with each other on scope. And that scope is on how long protection lasts after the person has passed away, or on what counts as a violation. If the No Fakes Act becomes law, it would preempt most future state action in this particular space. But it explicitly protects causes of action under state laws already on the books as of January 2nd, 2025. And here's the translation. The 8 states that I just mentioned that moved early get to keep what they built. The other 42 plus DC are waiting on Congress. The same posture we documented with neuro data protection back in merger 30, right? Where 46 states had zero coverage while a handful of early movers set the pace, right? Now, here's my lamest block. Here's my lamest block. And this is the same doctrine we've run all year, just with the new subject. Because a handful of states protect you. Most don't. And if you don't live in Tennessee, California, Illinois, New York, Utah, Arkansas, Montana, or the state of Washington, your legal protection against someone building the AI replica of your dead grandmother right now is essentially whatever a federal bill still sitting in Congress eventually becomes, or it doesn't become, right? Motivators, check your state against that list tonight if you're interested. 8 states, that's it. That's the current floor. That was the latest block. All right. So here's the doctrine nobody sitting in digital immortality once stated plainly. I'm going to say it, right? Because the law that actually governs what happens to your data after you pass already exists. Now, I know that sounds kind of contradictory, right? But it has existed for a decade and was never built with any of this in mind. It's called the RUFIDA Act, which stands for the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, right? Or RUFADAA. And it is adopted in 47 states and DC as of this year. And California, Louisiana, Massachusetts running their own equivalent statutes, right? RUFADAA sets a 3-tier hierarchy for who controls your accounts after you pass. First, any platform tool you set up yourself, like a legacy, contact, or inactive account manager, controls everything. Second, your will or power of attorney, right? If you left it explicit instructions. Third, the state default rules if you left neither. Critically, RUFIDA draws a hand line between the catalog of your communications, who you talk to and when, and the content of them, right? What you actually said, what your executor gets in the catalog by default. They only get the content, the actual messages, if you explicitly consented to that access before you pass, right? But here's the gap. RUFIDA, right? RUFIDA governs access. It says nothing about reconstruction. Nothing in the law that controls who can open your email after you pass says anything about whether the same executor can then feed your email to an AI model and build a talking version of you. Access law and replica law are 2 completely different legal regimes tonight, right? Built by different people in different decades, solving different problems, and almost nobody administering an estate right now understands they need both, right? And here's my language block. Right? Getting into your dead parents' email is one legal question. Already mostly have been solved. But building an AI chatbot out of what's in the email is completely different legal question. Barely solved anywhere. Most families don't even know these are two separate fights. And by the time they find out, the AI version already exists and somebody's already talking to it. Final bosses, this segment is the whole episode in one sentence. The law that lets your family in the door was never built to answer what they've allowed to do once they're inside. That's my layman's block, right? Now, let's talk about cause confession, right? It's time for the cause confession. Straight, no chaser, right? No softening. And here's what building Merger Wednesdays is all about, right? And the actual cost of it. And what it should cost you to sit with it. So sit with it, right? Because I'm about to give it to you. It costs research hours nobody sees, cross-checking a patent number, a build number, and a market projection across sources that don't always agree. Because getting the doctrine wrong, either overselling the danger or minimizing the real gap, fails the community that trusts this platform for verified information instead of panic or hype. That's the production cost, right? And here's your cost because you're listening. That's your cost. The discomfort of admitting you don't currently know what happens to your digital footprint, your photos, your voicemails, your last text when you pass. And that almost nobody in your family has that conversation until it's forced on them at the worst possible moment. Grieving under a deadline, making decisions about your face and voice with no instructions from you at all, right? Now, here's the layman's book. The actual cost of tonight's topic isn't money. It's the 20 minutes it takes to write down somewhere your executor can find it. What you do and don't consent to happening with your voice, your image, and your data after you're gone and you're no longer here. Because most people will spend time picking a coffin, then answering that question. That's backwards, and it's fixable. And we're going to try and fix it tonight for free before we close in this episode. Final bosses, that's your money in the bank moment. Not spending money, but spending a couple minutes you don't currently think you have, but you do, right? Now, here's something that's going to touch home, right? And this is what no one told you about, right? This is the family conflict that nobody warned you about, right? And I'm going to talk about it. Because hospice care professionals, the people actually in the room when families are making these decisions, are now on record describing what they call new complexities in bereavement care, directly caused by AI grief bots entering the grieving process before anyone's ready for them. The core problem they're flagging isn't the technology realism, it's the grieving families frequently disagree with each other about whether creating an AI version of a deceased loved one should happen at all. And there's currently no framework, legal or clinical, for resolving that disagreement when it splits a family down the middle. One sibling wants to keep talking to an AI version of their mother. Another sibling finds that same AI version disrespectful, even traumatic. A puppet wearing their mother's voice without her ever agreeing to it. Grief counselors interviewed on this described grief as a process worth fully experiencing, not something to be optimized around or engineered away. And that warns, big warns, right? Red flags that a chatbot trained to always be available, always comforting, never say the wrong thing, can quietly interrupt a grieving process that's supposed to include absence. And that doesn't even include the mental health and implications, right? It doesn't. Imagine that, right? But here's my latest block. Here's my latest block. Nobody built the mediator for this fight yet, right? If your family doesn't agree in advance on whether an AI version of you should exist after you die, you're handling your grieving children a fight about your image on top of grieving you. That's an entirely preventable fight. If the conversation happens while you're still here to have it, right? Motivators, this is your action step forming already, right? This isn't just your decision, it's a family decision, and families are already splitting over it without you. Layman's block, right? Now, let's move on. Because there's a fragility problem, right? Or fragility problem, I should say, of what happens when a company dies first, right? Because companies die, right? Every pitch in the industry sells permanence. Almost none of them can guarantee it. And we already have the case study. One of the earliest, most visible companies in this space, building interactive AI video replicas from recorded interviews, voluntarily filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2024. It has since reorganized and continues operating, but for a stretch of time, families who had picked and paid to preserve a loved one's interactive digital presence had no certainty that presence would still exist tomorrow. And this isn't a single company's problem, it's structural. Cryonics, the freezing of bodies, and in hopes of future revival, has already lived through this exact failure model. Freezers break down, companies go under, and what was promised as permanent turns out to depend on a business staying solvent for decades or even centuries. Digital afterlife companies inherit that same structural risk, just a little faster. A server contract lapses, a funding round fails, a platform pivots, and the permanent version of someone's mother built on a subscription model goes dark with a support ticket nobody is around to answer. And here's my latest quote. Forever is doing a lot of work in this industry's marketing. That word, forever. Stop falling for the bullshit, right? Stop falling for this bullshit. And if you are liking this content that I'm giving you, go like, share, and subscribe. Go tell somebody, man. Share it with at least 3 people, because I'm telling you, these conversations are happening. Everybody has to pass away. These bereavement conversations need to be happening now, right? Forever. It's bullshit. And it's doing a lot of work in this industry, marketing, right? And no company selling digital immortality today can actually back that word with a business guarantee that outlasts their own balance sheet. It's permanent. If permanence is the promise, ask what happens to the permanent version of your loved one on the day the company can't pay its server bill. Almost nobody selling this can answer that question alone or honestly. Warriors, that's the fight anybody's marketing department wants you thinking about right now. Not whether the tech works today, but whether the company survives long enough for forever to mean anything, right? That, my friends, is the latest block, right? Now, we just got finished talking about a company, right? So let's talk about a company that builds a patent for simulating someone's data without their advance say so. And calls it an option they're reserving, not a promise they're making, right? Because we talked about that earlier, right? And we're going to show you the counter model, because it does exist, even if it's the minority approach right now, right? Because some newer entrants in this space are building what is being called consent-first design, structural governance that requires the actual person's advance permission set while they're alive, defining exactly what can and can't be built, published, or monetized after they die. with an executor role that can lock or unlock features according to those preset instructions rather than according to whatever the platform decides is profitable later. Look, call it in doctrine terms an executor lock architecture, right? The dead person's prior instructions, not the living company's current business model. You have to control what happens. And that's the entire ball game, stated plainly, right? Every dangerous version of this technology we've covered tonight, the reserved patent, the strangers making unauthorized videos of deceased public figures, the family splitting over an unwanted grief bot, shares one root cause, right? And here it is. Someone besides the deceased person made the decision. Every safer version shares one root cause also. The deceased person made the decision themselves in writing before anyone else can make it for them, right? So, here's my lamest block, right? The single question that separates a respectful digital legacy tool from an exploitative one is simple. Did the actual person say yes to this specifically or in advance? Or did somebody else decide on their behalf after they couldn't object anymore? Ask a question about any platform before you or your family use it. Smarts, file this away as your evaluation framework. Consent architecture beats feature list every time in this category, right? And that's the lamest block. Now, let's get to the uncomfortable verdict, right? Let's talk about it, right? Let's get to the uncomfortable verdict, right? We should finish on time tonight. And this is the hardest one in this arc that we've delivered, right? Because the technology to truly continue your consciousness does not exist. It's decades away at best. And every product claiming otherwise right now is selling you a performance, not a resurrection. That performance can be beautiful. It can genuinely help a grieving child hear their mother's voice one more time. It can also be built without that mother ever agreeing to it. Monetized by a company that goes bankrupt in 3 years. Fought over by siblings who disagree about whether it should exist anyway. And legally protected by a patchwork so thin that the 8 states over the AI-replica question specifically and the federal fix is still sitting in the Senate committee as of tonight's broadcast, right? The uncomfortable part isn't the technology. It's this. It's your silence. It's your silence. And right now, tonight, while you're alive and capable of writing down what you do and don't consent to, is not neutral. Silence doesn't protect you from this industry. It hands the decision to whoever's left standing after you're gone. And I just showed you exactly how badly that can go. Family conflict on one side, company collapse on the other, with your face and voice caught in the middle of both. There's no version of this doctrine where doing nothing is the safe choice. Doing nothing is a choice. It's just not one you don't get to make consciously, because by the time it matters, you won't be here to make it. Now, here's my lamest block. The verdict in one sentence. If you don't decide what happens to your voice, your face, and your data after you die, somebody else will decide for you. And they will not all agree with each other while they're doing it. Warriors, that's the fight. Not against the company, but against your own silence. Now, let's talk about personal sovereignty, right? And personal sovereignty protocol, the 4 layers, right? We're going to close this out. Because the personal sovereignty protocol in 5 steps adapted for what happens after you're gone, right? If you don't have pen and paper, go get pen and paper. We're going to go through it, right? 5 steps. Here they are. Number 1, know your jurisdiction. Know your jurisdiction. Check whether your state is one of the 8: Tennessee, California, Illinois, New York, Utah, Arkansas, Montana, Washington, with a specific AI-replica law, and separately confirm your state's RUFADA status. 47 states plus DC have it. California, Louisiana, Massachusetts run their own version of it, right? And number 2, write the actual instruction down. Not a vague wish, but write the instructions down. I don't want to be turned into an AI. I don't want to be turned into an AI. That's it. Or I consent to a voice-based legacy tool only. No video, no interactive, no monetization. Are both real instructions. I trust my family to figure it out is not an instruction. It is an invitation to the exact conflict that we just described. And then number 3, separate access from reconstruction in your documents. Your will or power of attorney handles who gets into your accounts. That same document should separately and explicitly address whether anyone may use your data to build a digital replica. Because what we talked about earlier showed you those 2 are different legal questions with 2 different answers, right? And 4, check any platform consent architecture before you or your family uses it, right? Do the test. Ask the question. Did the actual person agree to this specifically in advance, or is a company deciding on their behalf, right? And then number 5, revisit it. Instructions written at 25 don't necessarily reflect what you want at 55. This isn't a document you write once and forget. It's a living instruction that should move with you. And that, my friends, completes the 4 layers of consciousness sovereignty framework. All 4 now on record. Private consciousness protected what's inside your skull while you're alive. Shared consciousness governed who gets to look in while you're alive. Collective consciousness governed what happens when you're willingly pull your mind with others while you're alive. And the immortal consciousness, which is what we discussed tonight, governs what happens to all 3 after you're not. 4 layers, 1 through line. Sovereignty isn't a single decision. It's a discipline you have to keep making, and now a discipline your instructions have to keep making on your behalf after you're gone, right? And here's my lamest block. We talked about 5 steps. 5 steps. All it takes is 20 minutes. And you've done something most people would never do. And that's put instructions ahead of anyone else's assumptions about what you would have wanted, right? Motivators, that's your full action list right there. 5 steps. Do them this week, not someday, right? That was the lamest block. Oh, man, we're going to go like a minute or 2 over, but we're closing, right? So this is what I'm going to talk about real quick. We're closed with that. Now it's time to move on to something before we close. And that something is 33 mergers. This has been episode number 33, season 1, right? 1 doctoral research arc closing its first full book tonight, right? Straight recap, no filter, because this is the last 4 minutes of the episode, of Merger One, and it deserves to land clean so you can actually understand what's happening here, right? So we opened this arc with 5 vectors framework, neurogenetic cognitive network, emergent, and the 3-layer architecture. We talked about smart blood. We talked about nanobots. We talked about smart dust, coveraging into the internet of bio nano things. Across 33 episodes, we built that architecture from first principles through smart blood, nanobots, smart dust, neural interfaces, and the consciousness internet, before spending the last 4 mergers on the consciousness sovereignty framework, specifically Merger 30, which was private, Merger 31, which is shared, Merger 32, which is collective, and Merger 33, which is what we talked about tonight, immortal. The statistical spine of this entire year holds a straight line across every layer we've covered. 46 states with 0 neuro data protection, established back in Merger 30, 29 of 30 neurotech companies failing basic contributor protection standards established in Merger 32. Over $960 million in brain-computer interface, or BCI venture capitalists, in the first quarter of this year alone. Takes a technology that the law still doesn't know how to govern. And tonight, 8 states with AI-replica protection and 1 federal bill still sitting in committee. And a 50-year-old fiduciary access law never built to answer whether your executor can rebuild your mind from your inbox. The year 1 sovereignty verdict is this. Every layer of this framework, private, shared, collective, immortal, tells the same story from a different angle. The technology to pool, access, or extend human consciousness is real, and it's accelerating, and is arriving faster than any legal framework built to govern who it belongs to. Not one layer of this framework found a jurisdiction where the individual is fully protected. Every layer found the same gap, early movement from a handful of states, silence from the rest, and the federal government perpetually one committee vote behind the technology it's supposed to regulate. That's year 1, documented, sourced, verified. 33 mergers deep. Year 2 opens next Wednesday, and the question changes. Because year 1 asks what this technology can do to you. Year 2 asks what you build once you've decided it's going to be done to you without your say-so. Ladies and gentlemen, before we close, the brass tacks one more time before we go. And pay attention, right? Smarts, motivators, warriors, final bosses, pay attention before we close. You don't get a vote on what happens to your mind after you're gone, unless you write the vote down first, right? Smarts, carry the 5 vectors and the front and the 4 layers into year 2 as one completed framework. Final bosses, the 20-minute instruction from earlier rides with you starting tonight. Motivators, run the 5-step protocol before this week ends. Warriors, 4 layers, 0 states with full protection. Remember that going into year 2. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Final Boss Podcast, Merger Wednesdays, Season 4, The Rebirth, Arc 5, The Declaration. Merger Wednesday's Layer of Consciousness. This concludes the first season of Merger Wednesdays, year 1. Starting next Wednesday, we start with year 2. This has been Merger Wednesdays, episode number 33, episode number 295 of the Final Boss Podcast. We are 5 episodes away from the harvest, which starts and begins season 5 of the Final Boss Podcast. That concludes this show. And if you don't, If you don't know this. There's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret. I am here. We are here. And always remember, be balanced, be equal, and be smart. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I will see you again tomorrow for a special guest Thursday. Either we're going to have a town hall or we're going to have a last-minute guest. See you then. But you have to tune in at 9 o'clock Eastern time to find out which one is going to be which. See you then. Take care.
It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory. They're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.